Great. So this workshop is going to be about bootstrapping Berlen bioregion. And how that works is we start first with the cultural foundation. That is defined by the territory, by the land itself. And then we move into technical solutions once the cultural foundation has been established. So why don't we just take a quick introduction, just to maybe say who you are, where you're from, and you can say maybe from a place or from a bioregion. So hello, my name is Antonio. I'm coming from Sicily in south of Italy. And yes, I am really excited about planetary bioregionalism, and I'm excited to share it with you all today. So why don't we start with you?
Hi, I'm Sylvie, and I'm originating from south of Berlin suburbs, which is very urban, not bioregion in a way. So it's called Ludwigsfeld, maybe you know it.
Hi, I'm Iru. I'm from Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. And I try to create bridges between forests and cities.
Hi, I'm Lawrence. I'm from Europe. I'm all about re-territorialization. And if I'm a maxi anything, I'm an IBC maxi.
Can you talk a little louder or won't be so loud?
He said he's an IBC maxi.
Is that what you chose to say, Lawrence?
So just as a play on words, and I think where this kind of design framework kicked off, was IBC stands for inter-blockchain communication. So traditionally we have a monolith like Ethereum that if you want to communicate with other chains, a custom bridge has to be built. And that bridge may or may not be secure depending on the design of the multi-sig that controls that smart contract. So what IBC does is it says we're going to take bridges and we're going to put it at the protocol level where it's just a standard format, which is much more secure and much more scalable. So if we can be doing blockchain to blockchain interoperability, could we be doing bioregion to bioregion interoperability? So that's just kind of like a key framework to be understanding bioregional blockchainism as an interconnected planetary system. Darina.
Hi, I'm Darina. I'm coming from Russia, from St. Petersburg, which is like 5 million big city. And generally the nature around is a little bit more like northern than here, but very similar to Berlin.
Yeah, my name is Franz Josef, and I'm an Earth citizen with cultural roots in Guatemala and the bioregion of Mesoamerica. And my other cultural roots are Austria in the bioregion of the Alps. Me also very relevant. I co-founder of Seeds in Haifa, and we do decentralized autonomous organizations, help communities build their own economies and alternative governance systems.
Hi, my name is Mikko. I come from the area of our planet that we call Scandinavia.
In the back? Anybody?
That's my very immediate connection to nature at the moment. Sorry for you, by the way, that's
Chris, Berlin, where else are you from?
Just say your name and where you're from. Okay.
Sure. Hi, I'm Tasker, also from Berlin. I think I got that cool seat here.
Mm-hmm.
First route's Bombay, second route Mediterranean, third route was Cosmos, now it's chain agnostic. So.
Chain agnostic.
Hi, I'm Kira. I'm Berlin based, but I come from Freiburg, from the very south of Germany.
Yeah, I'm Denny. I'm also Berlin based right now.
Okay, fantastic. So we just did our first bioregional mapping session because we're trying to find the others. Like, who are the other people that are interested in this topic? So when I say the word bioregion, what bioregion can define is a climactic system. defined by weather patterns, cloud formation, rainfall. It could be defined by mountains. It could be defined by cultural heritage. So you could, there are people who are doing bioregional mapping. So there's a organization called One Earth, and they have a navigator, so to speak, where you can go around the globe and see the different bioregions, and then bioregions can be subdivided into ecoregions, and then if you wanted to dial it down even further, within the ecoregions you have clusters of eco-villages. And eco-village could be what we kind of traditionally think of maybe as a village, more detached, or it could be distributed houses in an urban environment. So I think we have kind of like a broad definition of a bioregion. We have broad definition of eco-village. What we're trying to do is we're trying to say, how do we organize bioregional regenerative economies? How do we organize bioregional governance? So this is kind of a playbook that's being established with a guy, Joe Brewer, who's in Colombia, and he's written a book called Pathway for Regenerating Earth. And this is a pro-social framework. And pro-social has like 8 key elements for how we organize, how we go through our operations. And what pro-social really means is you're supporting the others. It's based on cooperation. So right now we're doing kind of like a fun pro-social experiment with Gitcoin, where we have an online community of say 4,000 something people who are Earth regenerators, who have read the book, who are participating in the learning journeys, but they don't know, they're not Web3 native. So what's happening now is we have this emergent regenerative bioregional economy that's popping up in this part of Colombia around this town Barichara. And it's becoming to the point now where we need to start fundraising to be investing in bioregional learning centers. So think of an ecoversity. So the design challenge is, how do we create funding mechanisms for community land trusts? So this is like a very foundational pillar of planetary bioregionalism, is taking land out of speculative markets and putting it back into commons trust. So that has been going on in Barichara, Colombia, through multiple waves of crowdfunding to raise upwards of $300,000 for buying key pieces in this territorial landscape that will be facilitated for watershed restoration. So what's happening now is we're at the point where we've laid out the frameworks for creating a territorial foundation, and then that is the governance layer for a bioregional regeneration fund. So this is kind of 1-2 step in how to bootstrap an autonomous bioregion or an alternative bioregion. And so I'll just kind of take a step back. How I got inspired by this was I'm sitting down reading the Permaculture's Designer Manual for like the 10th time, and you go through most of the book, and it's, you know, how to harvest rainwater, how to do natural building, how to do planting succession. You get to the final last chapter, and it says strategies for an alternative nation. And this was written in 1980, and it basically outlines both the political as well as the economic, what we would consider kind of like refi Legos for how to build this alternative economy based on the ecology. So we're taking kind of a playbook from Permaculture Designer's Manual, plus the pro-social, as well as with kind of this new app chain, modular, blockchain software architecture that has just hit the market in the last few years. So let's just pause there and maybe pause for some questions, because I think from here we can start to shift into like more local Berlin-based brainstorming and mapping. So questions right now.
Can you go more into the like what exactly the community, the blockchain community looks like, and what kind of work, specific work they'd like to do, or how they like to integrate it?
Yeah, okay. So 2 parts. One is going back to the whole Gitcoin grants thing. So this Barichara Regeneration Fund is looking to raise of $500,000 to basically implement common lands regeneration framework. So common lands, you're probably familiar with like Camp Altiplano, and like, so they have basically a 20-year timeline for doing territorial scale regeneration. So $500,000 is basically the runway for the first 2 years to keep like a core group functioning. And then within that you have a network of local regenerative projects, and Barichara as an example, it could be syntropic agroforestry projects, it could be like local ceramics, it could be weavers, fiber makers, so like all these kind of like localized producers who are already doing what they want to do. The problem is they're not connected to each other in a local economy. So we're still trying to do regeneration in a global extractive system that, you know, and everybody's banging their heads against the wall, like, why isn't this working? So in terms of the blockchain aspect, it's half of it is how do we design a system, and the second half is how do we build a culture around it. So going back to the Earth Regenerators example, where we have an online community who wants to support our cause, but they don't know how to use Web3. So if we say we're going to put a Gitcoin grant up, how many people can actually contribute to that in our community? So what we said was, we're going to create this is called cultural scaffolding, is when you basically create both a learning journey and a human support network around that learning journey. So we basically did a group call where we spent about 2 hours onboarding people with the MetaMask, with GitHub, with Gitcoin, and we gifted them $25 in ETH to make not one transaction, but more than two, because what we ended up doing was saying we have other friends in this network who are doing Gitcoin grants. So we teach somebody how to donate to one, and we tell them to donate to a second as well, and we can start to play with the quadratic funding. So we've just gone through a process where we've onboard, like at first the community was very resistant to Web3 integration because it's just too much, too overwhelming, too many new concepts. But eventually, after 2 years of kind of like this process of letting everybody kind of get their trauma out around money, right? So this is what it was actually really about, is people reconciling their internal discomfort and the mystery around it. So by creating that learning journey, we created a cultural scaffold to bring people in. Now they're trained up. And we can consider this, what we're doing right now, as a cultural scaffold to train people in how to do bioregional scale regeneration. So that was the answer to that question. Luckily, she's on it. Okay, you had a question as well.
And you bought the land already?
So money, so there's currently three properties that have been acquired. And then when I say acquired, what I'm saying is this is part of the commons now. So it's part of a land trust that the local community is managers and stewards of it. So yes, so 250,000 went to basically the largest piece of land, and that'll be the basis for the local bioregional ecoversity, the bioregional learning center. But what's funny is the bioregional learning center already exists in this informal network of relationships. We're just taking the informal and we're bringing it into the actual physical space through a physical university or ecoversity.
And it's bought from the government?
No. So this has all been through individual contributions of people within the Earth Regenerators community. And the Earth Regenerators is this online community, basically a study group around the book, Pathways for Earth Regeneration. Regenerating Earth. Same thing.
Yeah, it's just that if you're acquiring land or if you're acquiring property, you are acquiring it from someone.
Oh yeah, so the local people are selling it.
Okay.
And also too, not to go too deep into the Colombian land politics, but you have a situation where you have very few landowners, and then you have a lot of people who are struggling to afford. So, and this is not like, so it's, you have and rewind the clock even back, a lot of the civil violence in Colombia was around the lack of transparency in the land titles. So if we go way back, what we're trying to do is rewild. So we're going back to taking the land out of the speculative real estate market, putting it into trust. So if we start with like a bioregional container, we can kind of start from the end and work our way back. So if we're to say 7 generations from now, I mean, also too, let's say we've inherited this from 7 generations and beyond, and we're also trying to think about how do we design systems for 7 generations into the future. So the work that we're doing, even though it might feel very small today, this little workshop, we can't perceive the effects that will have downstream for our grandkids. But you know, if we think of, oh, feudalism was like, that's silly, like who wants to do that? We can't think like, why was there a housing shortage, and like it's probably not going to make sense to future generations. So and if we want to go into the blockchain design, we could say, well, we can tokenize the land titles and have those in a transparent distributed ledger, and use that as a peaceful transition beyond border wars and resource wars. Because that's what we're also kind of enveloped in, is this kind of global conflict situation combined with global ecosystem collapse, which are a mirror of our microcosm. So by doing this here, we can actually resonate out and create a fractal pattern where every bioregion at the same time is sprouting up and creating those alternative forms of economics and governance systems that we need. Yes?
So if you just purchase this land in a certain political ecosystem, aren't you kind of dependent on the stability of this political ecosystem, especially in South America, where it might be potentially unstable?
So it already is unstable. What we're doing is bringing more stability, both through grounded cultural relationships, as well as with those digital transparent distributed ledgers. And I mean, it's not just getting land titles on a blockchain. It is, how does we create a full stack, interoperable, composable bioregional economy? Because right now it's really hard for your worker co-op to plug into a local producer co-op, to plug into a NFT marketplace, to create a whole supply chain within that bioregion. So we don't have that capability now. It would be great if we could, because then we'd have a lot more efficiency and effectiveness in how we manage our limited resources. Yes?
Actually, this guy, I think that I should connect you to, because they just bought a land for a community in the Brazilian Amazonia. I think the question...
They haven't bought it yet.
No, they haven't bought it yet.
It's
That's right.
7,000 hectares. They can't afford it yet.
Yeah. And I think that might be interesting for them, actually, because I feel like they're a little bit lost. But anyways, my question, I think the challenge of property is like probably one of the biggest hurdles and first hurdles you probably have to take, right? And I'm wondering if, for instance, in Ecuador, the rights of nature principle is in place, and I'm wondering if you work with that in order to kind of like assure that the land stays within as a common for
but yeah, so we still have the problem of how do we manage human relationships on top of that land. So you can take land out of speculative real estate market, but we still need the human operations to actually regenerate degraded land. So we could just say, let's focus. So okay, let's start focusing in on Berlen right now.
Yeah.
So in Berlen, there are a lot of people trying to do regenerative efforts, correct? How do we feel? Do we feel that they're aligned? Is there enough communication happening between them? So the most minimum thing that can be done is to create a territorial foundation with leaders in the local space to then manage a bioregional regeneration fund that can be used to purchase land that could be turned into centraphic agroforestry. It could be used to invest in a local factory for cheese making. I'm making these up as examples. What we can start doing now, and by now I mean the local people continue to carry on this work into the future of mapping out who the people are and start to build those trust networks. So that's that can be fun, and I think there'll have to be more events in the future where we're bringing around more individuals who are interested or are already engaged in regenerative practices. So once we start to get kind of like a map of where the projects are, then we can start to add on the financial support layers, or the liquidity irrigation, so to speak. Yes?
So basically you have the infrastructure yet done, and what you're doing in a process now is like collecting leads, to say?
What I'm saying is we need to learn to facilitate emergence and to hold that in the complexity of planetary ecosystem collapse. So this talk today, what will happen next is I invite everybody to join the Earth Regenerators community to read the book because there's a lot more processes that are involved in terms of facilitating this change. And this is just like a very brief introduction that, I mean, we're not going to solve anything in here today. What the outcome for today will be is there's a nucleus of local people who are willing to take on the leadership role of that bioregional territorial foundation. And it can be an informal foundation to begin with, and we can be doing informal regeneration funding for, you know, a Gitcoin grant, for example, to a multi-sig. That's not where we want to go ultimately, but eventually we get to a point where we can launch a bioregional token. That token is then used to finance land-backed purchases to be put back into commons, and so now we have natural capital asset held in the bioregional trust that can then be used as the stable coin to then create all the other natural capital assets, social capital that we want to put on top of it. So it's like, if we don't have that foundation, it's going to be really hard to build up. Go ahead, sorry.
I have a thought to put in the room, and I want you to not take it in the wrong way. But what does us in blockchain make us think we can manage somebody else's land better? And I'm asking this from a very structured perspective. So I'm also a tokenomics mentor at Bitcoin Kernel, and sometimes we just see papers that come from students, from accelerators in universities, and they're like, my indigenous community is just a small scale of gold farmers, and we want to save them from arms and ammunitions being what their gold gets sold for, because that's very common in a lot of South American countries and countries ridden with war. And so the way she thinks about herself, her grandparents, her customs, her legacy, her tradition, her language, her land, her activities. I mean, if you have to put that on the blockchain, she has to be in control. So I'm really concerned with why we think we know better when, or rather, how do we give the power to them? Because you were talking about really.
So just let's just take blockchain out of the conversation. So blockchain is now out of the room. What are we actually doing? We're engaging in regenerative practices. That is informed by the degradation in our ecosystems. So if we say, well, we need to bring back this watershed at a territorial level, that's going to require a lot different coordination than just one individual managing their little plot. So I think this is more of a consciousness shift to not say not everybody's ready for this all at the same time. But what we can say is, are there enough people in Berlin who actually want to participate in establishing a bioregional economy based off of regenerative practices and start to map out those flows to say, would a blockchain solution help any of these features? Would we want to run a worker cooperative on top of a DAO, on top of a blockchain that's, you know, validated locally, co-located infrastructure? So I think that's a shift, because everybody has to bring their own authentic creativity to this problem. So I appreciate the question. Thank you. Yes.
Can you specify what exactly a bioregional economy is? Is that like a closed ecosystem which sustains itself?
So that is, if you zoom out and you look at how are the weather patterns forming, where were there forests, where was there running water, what is the soil health, what is the biodiversity. So these are all the different metrics that we're now starting to bring into the equation that were left out before. So actually the goal is remembering what used to be there and then bringing it back to life. Because everything is there. What's missing is the human trust and the human coordination, because we can trust each other and we can bring entire rivers back to life. But until there's that trust forming, nothing's going to change.
Thank you.
Trust, I mean, just to sort of short, I totally agree, and I think the project can absolutely, or DOT can absolutely help you bring back the trust and maintain it, just because it's mutual, etc., etc. But in the end, trust is about also relationships, actual, in real time, face-to-face communication. That's a lot of work.
Well,
which is great.
If we're bringing our human relationships back to the ground and working together to put in that syntropic agroforestry system to build those rainwater harvesting systems, these are the activities that are going to bring us trust back. But what I want to say is we have a much larger narrative of planetary bioregionalism as a way out of superpower, nation state, resource war, border enforcement. So I say we're going to have to kind of have both the trust and the trustlessness. I think that's kind of the fun part of the mystery, is how do we feel in the discomfort? So creating the cultural scaffolds to onboard people into this alternative regenerative pathway is going to be really critical. So I think it's already forming here with the Regens Unite, with the refi events. Now we're starting to be like, okay, we're getting together, we're starting to see the clearer picture, we've got like a roadmap, now it's time to execute. So we can be doing, you know, multi-layered, smart working, right? Because it's like if we're not working in coordination with everybody around the planet, it's still not going to work. So going back to your question about how do we map a bioregion, how do we capture value, or it's not even harvesting rainwater, yes, because we're trying to sync up with the flow of nature. We're trying to get our economic value flows to harmonize with the ecological value flows. And what's kind of interesting about the IBC model is if you have a bioregion here and a bioregion here, and let's say I want to be trading surplus across bioregional borders, that's much more easily facilitated because, and this is where we can kind of get into like a fun design chat of like agent-centric or more global state. What is the state of the ecosystem at any given time at a bigger scale? So those are much deeper design challenges that we don't have answers for yet because we're still like waiting for the culture to lead the way.
Would it be for you to redistribute the resources equally? Is that like what is a core thought of it? That you just map all the resources because they're limited and redistribute it in a way that it makes sense?
Yeah, so there's really good writing on nature is inherently decentralized. So nature just automatically distributes. Like there's no one pool of water, there's like no one big tree. So if we look to nature as that fractal design pattern, we can start to see where do we channel resources. Because now it's not a matter of everybody gets what's even, it's a matter of we have this very large planet with a lot of degraded ecosystems that are degrading. We have limited time, we have limited human capacity, we have unlimited creativity. So how do we start to bring our awareness back to focusing on what could be called social acupuncture points? So the Gitcoin is like social acupuncture. This is like helping us trust and believe again that we can actually work in a way that's constructive.
I think, just putting out my thoughts, we've got, like Germany has a bit of a cultural challenge because like Germans are always like, it takes ages to do certain things and we have to plan it and then you take ages to plan it. So I guess each bioregion, wherever it is, has its own cultural context. So maybe to help you like get this going.
I'm here to help you. You're getting this going.
Yeah, it's pro-social, isn't it? We could also look at what is there already in Berlin and what kind of resources we could tap into.
Yeah, I wish Klaus was here because so what we're doing in the lead up to Refi Barichara is a mapathon. So we're getting basically projects that are already on the ground. So we're just creating a simple Google form, we're sending it out to people who we already know, and let's at least just, do we even have a map of the regenerative projects in Berlin? Or in the surrounding area? It could be like grade step one to just get everybody together kind of on the same page. And then we can start to talk about community currencies, and then we can start to talk about digitized worker cooperatives. So I think just getting the people together in the same room, or at least in the same field. And Dorina, do you want to mention, because I know you're very like exposed to the space here, maybe you want to share some thoughts on how you see the regenerative space in Berlin, and also too, like, you know, what is the model for like continental Europe? Like, what is the model for it as the EU continues to fall apart? I'm sorry, that was a big second question, but focus on the first.
Cool. I have a feeling, or at least this is my very subjective opinion, and maybe also a little bit blind due to the last 2 years when I was not meeting people in person much, I guess. I have a feeling there is a personal connection between people, but there is not much connection between the projects that are being developed, and we could definitely build on top of the personal relations, and we could just find something what also makes Berlin as an ecosystem unique and keep on doing it together. And yeah, that's, I don't even know like where all the projects are. I know like bits and pieces. Sometimes you are just walking somewhere and like, oh wow, this is amazing, interesting, and you really don't have an idea how to find out about those projects. So yeah, I think it's a first step.
And also too, even once you start a project, we're the support network to continue. And I think, you know, just people burning out or not finding the funding, or so I think that's also another really big challenge.
A few years back, there was the dream that somebody was going to get tons and tons of money to make Berlin into a solar pump city. And so we started to imagine, how could we actually do this? And we started to do some of this mapping process. So that's part of the document which I can share, and you can look through. It's not complete, it's far from a finished map, but there's a bunch of interesting information inside of that.
So put the map on the map.
Map on the map.
Hannah. Oh. Yeah, go ahead, Hannah.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just wondering, in the circle, in the refi circle, I think we talked about, yeah, like onboarding communities as well, or like helping, bringing all these like little sustainable or regenerative projects together. But I think one learning that we had from there was that also, I mean, I really like the point of connecting projects, but I think I would also like to have this like participatory aspect in the decision making very strong, and that communities choose themselves which technology fits them best. Yeah? And I think this is like a very important point. I've looked a bit into that, and there is an NGO that is actually working on digitization of the rural areas in all of Germany now, and they are actually doing it with like this way with participatory projects. And I thought that would be like a line for Web3 projects also possibly to jump in this, because I think there is potential, but I think I would still really like to give the power to the people to decide upon that, whether they want that or not. And yeah, so I think that's at least one learning.
Well, using Gitcoin as the example, it's like what people were afraid of to use. Now, once they got onboarded, they're even more excited to use it even more.
Yeah, of course. Of course, also that could be an opportunity to like give them like the room to experiment with that. You know, I guess that's very important, of course. But yeah, but there needs to be a like still an exit option or something, right?
Yeah,
like
of course.
I'm just saying this because it is something that happens a lot in Germany, that you have this concept of smart cities, which is very big. And
we have to unlearn all that.
Yeah, and it's really just getting imposed on people. Yeah, and so then you have to work and adapt to all this technology, and it's not up to you, you know. And I think that's why I would like to see also people wanting that, you know, and they really, yeah, like indulging the use of it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's not so much about figuring out who is doing what where, but it's much more connecting deeper based on the values that we share as a community. And that's also what Hannah just said. I totally agree that that has to be much deeper. And also it's amazing because I live in Berlin for the last 9 years, and I see people coming back to the same, like, if they have certain values, they keep on staying at the same place and following them, executing things the way they see them. And that's what we should just build on. If we believe in something, like, we connect on that.
Going back to the whole bioregionalism, is our values, we're attracting people who share the values of of the ecosystem and the stewardship and the regeneration of that ecosystem. So with the pro-social framework, one of the first things is common agreed values. So going back to the mapping thing, well, I guess there's two layers. One is mapping what needs to happen in the ecosystem, like the actual landscape, and then what needs to happen in the inner landscape as well, because this is a transformative process that we're all undergoing as we kind of embody. If we want a global climate solution, we're going to have to start thinking, more in terms of global systems as opposed to, antiquated nation state, nationalism slash whatever. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's great. We also have a lot of stuff to contribute in terms of communities. We have already a Berlin Circle community that's already self-organizing. We have some cool communities here around right now. We've just been contacted by the Host Foundation that want to support this emergence. The BMW Foundation is already wanting to support this also at a more European global level. And yeah, I know Joe Brewer already for quite some time, and also Jeff Kinuk from ProSocial, also a good friend. You mentioned also One Earth. We're working right now with One Earth to create a bioregional DAO for realms, sub-realms, bioregions, and ecoregions, where the process that we're taking is essentially identifying movements that are already locally, that are already present, bringing together a multi-stakeholder process, cross-sectoral, bringing people from the civil society, individuals, entrepreneurs, government, creating the spaces for connection where we create scenarios for the future, looking where they want to be in the next 10 years. From that sort of common envisioning where the values are codified onto chains, let's say, you're able to, importantly, what you were alluding to is a contribution framework, really identifying what are the gaps in our society that need to be filled. So what we then do is the technology stack to align the gaps the contribution needs with capital in a very transparent manner where you can actually see real-time impact integrity where the value flows are going and how they're serving.
So I want to also just kind of like, how does this integrate with a full stack?
Keep up Sorry, bro.
So I guess another kind of design thinking is how does that action integrate with both the vertical of every regenerative action that needs to be taken within the bioregion, as well as is that pattern replicable across other bioregions as well, relying on NGOs for financing. So what's nice is if you were to say, if we have a territorial foundation which is managing the bioregional fund, so thinking in terms of like bioregional regenerative fund to say, well, if we need money to go to the agroforestry systems, if we need, where are the investments going, I guess, is the second question to that. Yes, Chris.
Come on, guys.
I'm sorry.
Come on, guys. Let me in.
All
right.
Do you want to come sit over here because the camera?
Sure.
Get your pretty face on camera.
Your pretty face anything. Okay, so I have a background in community currencies. I've been able to hang out with these guys, and everybody knows me. I designed my first local currency in 2009, ran a couple of pilots, and then took over for the Ithaca Hours in Ithaca, New York. Launched a new currency there in 2015. Had a front row seat to the advent of the Bancor protocol, the creation of automated market makers, which for the first time would allow us to take small-scale community currency systems and connect those out to other systems. You know, one system really, I mean, I guess you could say Let's is doing the same thing, but very few community currency-based systems like Let's or barter networks have the ability for you to port your units across communities. A lot of emphasis is put on this in the design space. The actual usage of this has been extremely low. It's actually not that big of a priority in terms of user demand, let's be clear. But you still want to have this design construct where you're treating the currency as a public good and as an enabling system, as an incentivization system for the community to target towards its most urgent needs, right? So what I'd like to offer as a provocation here is blockchain is often very kind of like yang energy, masculine oriented. What are we saying? What's the thing? Where's it moving? Where's it going? Whatever. But when it comes to this space, it's much more yin and feminine, where it's about listening and creating kind of receptor fields for a variety of kinds of emergence, right? Because so it's about listening to those communities, seeing them for who they already are, right? They have their own ways of being, their own culture, their own social structures, their own power dynamics, their own ways of working with money, right? But we're not designing this in a vacuum. We need to move $50 trillion from degen to regen. And that means bringing capital that is often just like out in outer space as far as a connection to the real world back down to the ground. And that's why the circuitry is so important. I think that basically I found myself in this design space and asked this question like, okay, if I have not just a local currency network, right, where I'm a network kind of in semi-competition with other networks, but if I can get the other networks to see the currency as their own resource, right, to enable their own people to be more effective in what they're trying to do already, great. Then how would we network those networks together into a shared governance, kind of in like a collective impact type of way of like we all say these are the things we care about, and then we all say, okay, these are the things we're doing to serve those goals, etc. So what would be the common components of that? What are the things that occur? What does this contribution accounting system look like such that any actor out of any organization or place could participate in the common act of regeneration, and we would have the ability to acknowledge and appreciate the value that they've brought to that process. So what I would just like to offer is that I believe the common thread across all these different things is just simply the change management process. We are here to go from where we're at to something better. That is kind of a universal.
You're saying upgrading?
Thing. Yeah. I mean, like, look, we clearly can't sit on the sidelines any longer, but.
Well, I think it's not that we're sitting on the sidelines, I feel like we're just treading water.
Yep.
And it's like, where's the boat?
Yes.
And then, and then we just remember to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I see the strategy moving forward would be, what are the very small steps that can be taken to kind of test out these primitives, while learning in parallel with the other bioregions that are implementing the same practices, because that's where the real compare and contrast is going to be extremely helpful and important.
Mm-hmm.
So as we build up to this Refi Barichara event in Colombia at the beginning of October, that's going to be a great learning experience for everybody to see, okay, what's working, what's not working, because what's really happening is it's all emergent. Like, there is no way to plan this in advance, because what we're trying to do, and what you go back to, how quickly can we respond to the emergency.
Yeah.
So
responsibility.
And then that will define what tools we use.
Yeah. I think our major critique of the existing systems is, they're irresponsive to our needs, right? So they're irresponsible. If we want to accept, the responsibility for our communities, then you need to be able to see what you need to be able to respond to and have the capability to respond to it, right? Actually address the issue. And so I think, with this kind of scaling back down, right, or maybe re-emergence of the bottom up, we can create faster feedback loops between the problems, the resources, the solutions, etc. And I think that using a change management process kind of thing of like, first you're just doing the needs assessment, then ideating, then planning, then approving, resourcing, implementing, and assessing, you get the right kind of sensory apparatus for any type of emergence, across whatever context, and that without taking some top-down, well, we know better, as was the comment earlier, like what entitles us to tell people how to manage our place. You don't at all. You're just helping establish an infrastructure that visibilizes where people are trying to have a positive impact.
I just want to, because I think now it's a great time to shift a little bit deeper into what are the needs that you see in Berlin that could be those social acupuncture points of how do we manage our limited resources and kind of demonstrating these regenerative solutions. So I know you had a question. I don't know if that applies to it.
I was just going to say, from the tech stack perspective, I'd love to see a Cosmos holochain bridge synergy.
It's emerging.
Oh yes.
But going back to the because it could be we need bike lanes, or we need water filtration. Like, what are the things as people in Berlin living here what do you see as kind of some of those low-hanging fruit that could be easily mobilize the regenerates to come around and to get like that small win?
Water is definitely a resource that has to be tackled. Berlin is supposed to become a sponge city, like a really bad name, but like we've got trouble to the world, right? And at the moment the city is getting a lot from Brandenburg, from the other states owning it, but there are issues, and we're not really collecting water. And that is a thing that really has to be tackled, especially because summers are just awful here, and you can see the parks. So yeah, you go ahead.
Clean streets.
What else? Shout it out.
There's about to be a winter, and energy is about to be, people are going to start freezing here soon. And I was just right now, before this meeting with the head of GLS Bank, they're saying that the wintertime energy systems are going to be going down. There's going to be a lot of immigration from other parts of Europe coming to Berlin for seeking refuge. They're wanting to right now invest a lot in places where people can actually heat and not freeze. So the urgency is pretty heavy.
But I wonder if it's like, because I think we always revert back to, can we get the funding? Or waiting for permission from an outside source to give us the money so that we can integrate the solutions versus we are taking all of the human capital that we have in our power to be creative with solving the solutions. So I think now we start to get some actual like traction where the Berlin Bioregional Territorial Foundation with the fund can start to then be saying, no, we are choosing who we fund, not the other way around. So if we need to be working on water, streets, heating, food access, like these are all the things that have to be tackled or at least facilitated, and it's not like allowing for distributed teams to be tackling these complex problems in interoperable ways.
Seeing where is fertile soil and people who want to do something with it.
Yeah.
And with fertile soil, do you feel like the soil is not fertile, or two, you don't have access to land?
You also need people who are actually able to use it.
And trained human labor. So I'm hearing a lot of potential for different projects that are all kind of like synced up and are having like compounding value added. So it's like and I think we're starting to see the transition here of one team working on one problem versus a bioregional network of people who are sense making together and have value systems that can interoperate. Any other thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I think like a bunch of small events, like collective events where people maybe just from the neighborhood or whatever, you come together, you go like, okay, let's create a small, like, I don't know, vertical garden thing here, just right there, out of very simple stuff.
Right.
So
and why would you go? Why would you want to participate? What would be the
because
incentive?
my incentive is I'm learning something, I'm contributing to my community, and I'm connecting in that kind of sense. So, and I mean, we are, I think, sometimes so much focused on those kind of big events where there's so much stuff going on that we are all overwhelmed, and then it's
absolutely, like, I know, it's too much.
And proactively gets you into, oh, this is pretty nice and easy and handy, and I can go on. So it's a bit like gamifying this thing. You get to know more players, and you're pretty much doing things together. And I think through this active experience, wherever it is, then everyone can just make their step without being enforced to take that step from an outside source that says you gotta do this because it's needed, otherwise we're all dead. So from that perspective.
So, yeah, go ahead.
The incentive is a potluck, a huge potluck, so everybody gets free food. And those who want to play, and then those who just want to eat.
Well, I think we have so much capacity building for understanding how we design regenerative solutions. So if it is, building rainwater systems, or if it's building like rocket stoves, like all these little things that, aren't too complicated to do, but it's just really hard to teach. Like I went through a period, I don't know, a couple years, just like watching every YouTube video on every different thing that could be done from like a permaculture perspective. You go and work on the permaculture farms, you go and do all these activities, and you realize you cannot do everything. And this is where we come back to Bioregional Learning Center ecoversity where we are already in school. We're in school right now. Like this Regens Unite is actually an ecoversity. So I think it's just shifting our perception of what we're actually doing and how much power we actually have, and start to catalyze the inherent liquidity that already exists. What time is it?
31 past.
Okay. Do we want to just wrap up with any final questions or comments?
I'm curious about the roadmap.
It's emerging. I mean, I think in terms of technical implementation, I think there's like a lot of interesting discussion that can be had right now and small experiments. So this is my big inspiration for wanting to co-host the Refi Barichara event between Cosmoverse and DEF CON, is to actually get people to pay attention to the actual planetary solution for Earth regeneration. To start getting more mind share thinking about what does that mean from a blockchain architecture perspective. So I would love to see more technologists come into the conversation and to start thinking more of designing these systems with natural patterns. So I mean, I can write down all day what I think is going to happen, and then tomorrow comes and it's not what I thought, and so we just go back to the drawing board, versus going out into the field, deploying the test, getting the feedback and iterating. And so, I mean, I'm really excited. So Refi Barichara is going to be October 3rd through 7th, after Cosmoverse, before DEF CON in Barichara, Colombia. So if anybody is wanting to come down for that, if you're going to already be in Colombia, let's talk. But we're basically doing that at a much more advanced scale. So imagine Berlin in 3 years with this network. So that's what's happening in Barichara. And I think another really important thing that Barichara is demonstrating is following the indigenous pathways. Because we have to kind of like rewild, ground back down, get it back into the seasons. We can't be in this like H&M consumer kind of like flash boy mindset. So thank you all for coming. I think this is just the beginning, and it's going to only get more and more fun and crazy chaotic as the cosmic order ensues. So thank you very much.